it provides so much more security than just block depth, which is what I think people tend to rely on today. Ethereum blockchain, to pay for a coffee, don't want to wait 16 minutes. The fund allow you to trade, but that allow you to withdraw anything until the block is confirmed. Why implementing it is not that complex. The algorithm itself is quite complex because of
Ethereum has come a long way since its inception, and while it has made great improvements in scalability and security, there are still challenges to address. One of those is transaction finality, how quickly a transaction can be confirmed as permanent and irreversible. Today, we are exploring an exciting proposal that might cut Ethereum's confirmation time to as low as 12 seconds. Sounds too good to be true? Let's find out how this is possible. Hello and welcome to PEEPanEIP, your go-to place for deep dives into Ethereum's research, standards, and innovation. I'm your host, Pooja Ranjan, and today we are delving into a groundbreaking research topic that could redefine transaction finality in Ethereum. This is the fast confirmation rule for Ethereum's POS consensus protocol. To discuss this, we are joined by one of the 5 researchers actively working on this confirmation rule, Roberto Saltini. Thanks, Roberto, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Pooja, for having me on PEEPanEIP. Very excited to be here.
I have been in touch with Roberto for quite some time and had the pleasure of meeting him in person at DEF CON last year. I was genuinely impressed by this research and I wanted to have this conversation even before we have an EIP formally proposed for this. But before diving into the details of your research, Roberto, we would love to hear more about you, your professional background, and how you discovered Ethereum. Maybe a little bit about your journey with the ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Pleasure to do so. I did get into blockchain into 2017. I was looking for something more exciting than what I was doing at the moment. I was looking for something new, a space with a lot of problems to be solved, and I thought blockchain was perfect fit. So 6 years ago, I joined Consensus, where I started a research team focused on distributed systems and formal verification. Initially, we were more focused on consortium blockchains, but then the focus moved to, over the past 3 years, to mainnet. And we did a lot of work on the consensus protocol itself, for looking at some aspects like the fork choice. And then recently, as the beginning of this month, I moved to the Ethereum Foundation to continue the work I was doing and working on this confirmation rule, but also my main focus will be on synchronous lock finality as well.
That's pretty interesting. I have known many developers who have started with Consensus and landed up in Ethereum Foundation. Glad to see you join here as well, and I hope to see you continuing the research work.
Thank you.
All right, so without further ado, let's get into the presentation.
So yeah, as Pooja mentioned, present on this algorithm for the Ethereum protocol, which is called fast confirmation rule. And we'll see soon why it is called in this way. And so we'll start by answering kind of an obvious question: what is a confirmation rule? Now, if we look at blockchains in general, and so is Ethereum, we have a chain of blocks. Each block has a reference to its parent, down to the initial block, which is called as the genesis block. So in a way, we have potential multiple different chains. We have a tree. All of these chains are rooted into the genesis block, but we can have many different chains. Now, the canonical chain, which is a key concept in blockchain in general, is the chain that the validator believes to be the official one, the one to follow. Of course, validators might have a different canonical chains, so it is really, to be precise, a local concept. Each validator might have a different one. Generally, when people speak about canonical chain in general, they refer to the, in a way, the chain that is common to all the honest validators. So they may have different chains, but there is believed to be one that is common to all of them. So with keeping in mind this canonical chain concept, we can move to what block confirmation is. And so confirmation is some sort of algorithm, and I think the best way to define it is by defining the properties that this algorithm must give us. There are two. I'll start with the one that is called the safety property, as it is, say, the most important, also the more easy to get a grasp of. We want that when we confirm a block, this block will always be, will never conflict with the canonical chain of any honest validator. So if we look at the image in the middle, if we say that block B is confirmed, and then with the passage of time, the situation evolves to the situation we have on the left-hand side, then we are good, because B is in the canonical chain of any validator. However, if it happens that we move to the situation on the right-hand side, we have a problem. As you can see, B is not in B1's canonical chain anymore. What this means, it could mean different things. It could mean that this confirmation algorithm that we applied is wrong, or it could be that some of the assumptions that the confirmation algorithm relied upon are not true anymore. This is also what can happen. This, defining the assumption is something that is quite important. So now that we have defined what confirmation rule or confirmation algorithm is, we can explore why we need a fast confirmation rule. So we already have a confirmation rule actually in Ethereum, and this is finalization. When we finalize a block, we know that that block will never conflict with the canonical chain of any honest validator. This, unless more than 1/3 of the stake is going to be slashed, and if this happens, it is possible to unconfirm a finalized block. As you can see, this is an assumption. So if we rely on finalization as confirmation rule, we have this assumption. We assume that it will never happen and 1/3 of the stake is going to commit slashable offenses. Now, there is the problem with finalization is that it is slow. It is great as it is very resilient. It has this very good economic property, but it is quite slow. 30 minutes in the best case scenario, 16 minutes on average. This is quite long to wait for some use cases, like you go and use some Ethereum blockchain to pay for a coffee, you don't want to wait 16 minutes. And there are other cases where this is bearable, but not ideal. Like if you move money to centralized exchange, then you can't use these funds until the chain is being finalized, which is not ideal for user experience. So because of this slowness, people might come up with some, say, dangerous solution to speed up confirmation. One of the, say, probably most common is to rely on block depth. And this is common because this is something we could do with proof of work. But block depth alone doesn't tell us much about confirmation. Another way potentially is to rely on justified block. Justified block also is relatively slow. It is at least an epoch, so at least 6.5 minutes. It is better than block depth, but it's still lacking information actually for us to determine that that block is confirmed. And the general problem actually with both solutions is that we don't have a defined set of assumptions that must hold in order for the safety property that I mentioned before to hold. Like we don't have this condition 1, 2, 3 that if they hold, then we know that the block will always be canonical. This is where our work comes in. So we have two objectives with this confirmation rule: is to provide fast confirmation, 1, 2, 3 slots, ideally 1. That's what theoretically we think we can do. But also we want to have a well-defined set of assumptions that need to hold for a confirmed block's safety property to hold. This is to provide the user, so the user knows exactly what assumptions, what they believe to hold, to be true, to rely on this confirmation rule, so that they are fully aware of, say, if you want, the risk that they are taking the risk rewards that they are taking between, the risk that these assumptions might not hold and the reward of having quite quick confirmation time. Now, before diving into the details of the confirmation rule algorithm, I need to provide a quick recap of how Gasper works. Gasper, which is the Ethereum consensus protocol, as the confirmation rule is deeply dependent and vary on how Gasper works. So, as we said, Gasper is the consensus protocol of Ethereum. It's a proof-of-stake consensus protocol, and it is composed of two algorithms. One is the LMD-GHOST, which is a consensus protocol that is synchronous, so it relies on network being good, on messages being delivered in time. And this is the protocol that determines the canonical chain. And we have another protocol, which is Gasper FFG, which is a gadget that finalizes the block outputted by LMD-GHOST. FFG Gasper doesn't rely for finalization to hold on synchrony. They can, when the block is finalized, this is not going to be broken if there is some network partitioning. So these two protocols complement each other. You can see in the picture below, you can think of LMD-GHOST providing what is called available chains. So there are different chains on the right-hand side, and FFG Gasper finalizes some prefix of these chains. I'll discuss more later a bit how Gasper FFG and LMD-GHOST interact. Initially, what we're going to do, we'll focus mainly on LMD-GHOST. But I need to provide still some common concepts. So in Gasper, time is divided into epochs, and each epoch is 32 slots. We also have a set of active validators, and the set of active validators is randomly partitioned across each slot in each epoch. And this partitioning gives rises to committee. So to each slot, we assign a committee, a subset of the overall active validator set, and this committee is the one responsible for voting in that slot. And out of this committee, one validator is chosen to be the proposer. So looking at how LMD-GHOST protocol works, we have this slot, which is called second, which has two main phases. One is the propose phase, the other one is the vote phase. In the propose phase, the validator that has been randomly chosen to be the block proposer will propose a block, extending their canonical chain. Then at the voting phase, validators in the committee for this block will vote. If everything goes well, they're expecting to vote for the block that was proposed. This is not necessarily the case. It can happen they vote for different blocks, but they do vote for some block, and if things go as expected, they will vote. They vote for the block that has been proposed. Now, a very important concept in LMD-GHOST is the for-choice function, which is the function that determines what the canonical chain is. And this is not based on chain depth. This is based on the weights of the LMD-GHOST votes. So if we just consider LMD-GHOST, no FFG, like we start from the genesis block, the way it works is that we assign a weight, an LMD-GHOST weight, to each block. And this weight corresponds to the state of the validators that sent an LMD-GHOST for any block in the tree of the block that we are considering. Like in this case, if we consider B2, we consider the entire tree that is rooted in B2. And the way you compute the weight, we look at all the validators that have cast an LMD-GHOST for B2 or any of its descendant. We take the overall stake of this set of validators, and this will be the weight, the LMD-GHOST weight associated with B2. And then the way the canonical chain is chosen is by starting the first block, if we don't assume Gasper, just the genesis. And every time we choose the branch that has the highest weight. In this way, this is the way that LMD-GHOST determines the canonical chain and the head block. Now, an important kind of details and this we like it impacts how the confirmation rule is designed is that if a validator in the same slot votes for two different blocks, then we say this validator equivocates and their vote is not counted at all in computing the weight. Now all of this should provide us enough to be able to provide all the concepts that we need to look at how a fast confirmation rule just for LMD-GHOST initially can be designed. We'll add FFG later. At the beginning, we take this two-step approach as it's kind of embedded. We do this because of how the Gasper protocol works. We have LMD-GHOST, and then FFG is essentially a gadget that finalizes a prefix. So first thing we need to do is to find at least a confirmation rule for the LMD-GHOST chain. I start, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of our objectives is to have a defined set of assumptions. We have, broadly speaking, two assumptions that we rely on. One is the one normally called synchrony, and it is about timing of message delivery. What we assume is that LMD-GHOST votes sent by honest validators are delivered by the end of a slot. The second assumption is that we know of value beta, and this value beta represents a maximum fraction of Byzantine state for any set of committees. So like we take a given set of slots, we take the union of all the committees assigned to this slot. We assume that there is value beta that we know, and we know that no more than beta, the total stake of the union of all the validators in this committee will be dishonest. So maximum beta total stake dishonest, which means at least 1 minus beta total stake is honest. This value beta can be, just an aside, the confirmation rule is subjective. Potentially each validator has its own confirmation rule, or each user. So the beta is a parameter that each user can choose depending on what they believe to be this fraction. Now that we're done with the assumptions, we can start looking a bit how confirmation rule for LMD-GHOST works. And as I said before, confirmation rule cannot be about block depth. What we saw that matters in determining the canonical chain is the weight, the LMD-GHOST weight. So it must be about LMD-GHOST weight, not chain depth. So let's start with this simple scenario. We assume that B10 is canonical forever, for now. And then for this, we run numbers, and for our example, we assume that a beta is 0.2 or 20%. So always we take any contiguous set of committees, no more than beta, the weight of this committee will be dishonest. And for our example, we assume that the weight of a committee is 100. So one idea is that we require that the support for B11, so in this case, SB11 is what I use as like symbol. SB11 means the weight, the LMD-GHOST weight for B11. So one idea is to require that this LMD-GHOST weight is larger than the weight of the committee multiplied by half plus beta. And that's because we'll see why so if we use this example, this would be more than 100 multiplied by 0.7 is half with beta to be 0.2. So more than 70, let's say the LMD-GHOST support for B11 is 71. The weight for this conflict, the LMD-GHOST weight for this block, for sure will be less than half the weight of the committee. That's because we know that a maximum beta of the stake can equivocate. So it's possible that from the above, from the orange cloud, we have beta taken away. But that's for sure at least half the LMD-GHOST support for B11 will be larger than half of the committee. As honest validators, they never equivocate. So what can happen in this case is that, for example, there is a mistake here in the slide. The other line should be SB12, not SB11. So here in the bottom cloud, we are referring to B12. So in this case, we require that SB12, the LMD-GHOST support for B12 is less than 50. So we take, for example, 49. Now, what can happen is that, again, beta of the state equivocates. So they send an LMD-GHOST, before they sent an LMD-GHOST vote for B11, but now they send it for another block. So if this happens, then the LMD-GHOST support for B11 decreases from 71 to 20. This is still 51, which is still higher than the 49 that we have for B12. This means that if you apply this rule, checking that the LMD-GHOST support for B11 is larger than half plus beta of the overall committee, yes, we know that B11 is canonical for every honest validator. However, this is not enough. What we want is that B11 is canonical now and forever. And so let's have a look if this is the case using this rule. So let's start from where we got to. The LMD-GHOST support for B11 is 51. Now a new block is appended to it. All the honest validators will vote for it. We say, so that will be 80 because of the new committee. We assume 20 might be dishonest. And this weight is then added to the weight for B11, which comes up to 131. If we work out the numbers, the value that we needed was the weight of the committee now is, because we moved, we have an additional slot. Now the weight of the overall committee that might vote for B11 is the one for the slot of B11 plus there's one for the slot of B13, so the overall weight is 200. So what the threshold we require, which is half plus beta of the weight of the committee, is now 200 multiplied by 0.7, which is 1/4. This means that the LMD-GHOST weight for B11 doesn't anymore meet our threshold, the larger than half plus beta multiplied by W. So the question is then B11 still going to be canonical forever? The answer is yes, even though this threshold doesn't hold anymore. But to prove it, we need a clever trick. And this clever trick is that initially we assume to know who is honest. Of course, we don't know, but we assume it for the moment. And we represent the honest LMD-GHOST weight with the letter H. So in this case, HB11 represents the stake of honest validators supporting that are considering the GHOST weight, LMD-GHOST weight for B11. And J is the subset of the overall committee that is honest. So in this case, because beta is 20%, we take J to be 8. So let's have a look at how we can use this to determine whether the B11 is canonical. What we're going to require is that the honest LMD-GHOST support is at least half the overall weight. And this is enough because we know that honest validators, they never equivocate. So for sure, the LMD-GHOST support for B11 will be larger than half of the overall, of the maximum weight that can support B11. For sure, B11 will be chosen compared to any conflicting block. Now, however, to work things out, we need to express this a bit differently. What we're going to require is that the LMD-GHOST H support for honest support for B11 is larger than the weight of the honest committee multiplied by half divided by 1 minus beta. Now, this second line implies the first one, is that because at the beginning we said our assumption is that the weight of the honest validator is at least 1 minus beta, the weight of the overall committee. So if we plug this equation, J larger than 1 minus beta multiplied by W, in the second line, we then can infer that the LMD-GHOST for B11 is larger than half of the committee. Now, if we run our numbers on this, it comes out that HB11 must be at least 50. So we take just one more, we take 51. So in this case, we have a honest weight of 51 supporting B11. What we're going to work on is actually we just write things a bit differently. The same thing, we just use this P indicator. P indicator is just the ratio between the LMD-GHOST, honest LMD-GHOST supporting B11 and the weight of the honest committee, J. In this case, it's 51/80. And of course, like it's simple, like what we required in the second line in the red cloud implies this fraction, this P indicator is equivalent to it, required that this P indicator must be larger than half divided by 1 minus beta, which is the case in this scenario. So 51/80 is roughly 0.63, which is larger than half divided by 1 minus beta, which is 0.625. Now let's see what happens when we move to the next lot. Now W becomes 200, J becomes 160, as we have new validators that can potentially vote LMD-GHOST for B11 or a descendant. Now what's going to happen is that B11, because of the rule, we require that HB11 was larger than half the overall committee. We know that B11 is canonical. At the point was canonical for every honest validator. So every honest validator will then vote for B11 or a descendant, in this case B13. Assume that all the honest vote for B13 or even B11 will be the same case. We have 80. Value of 80, again, 80 is because we assume 20% might be dishonest. That is added to B11. So the honest LMD-GHOST weight for B11 becomes 1/3. Now, if you're going to calculate this indicator P for B11, is 1/3 over 160, that is larger than 0.81, which is larger than our target of half divided by 1 minus beta. So this is great because we saw that PB11 being larger than half divided by 1 minus beta, it implies that the LMD-GHOST support for B11 is larger than half of the overall committee. In this case, is larger than 100. And this is enough to determine that B11 is canonical, even at the next lot, which is exactly what we want. Now, so far, we have worked in a kind of simplified scenario as we assumed we move to the next lot, with the next lot still being in the same epoch. This makes things easy because when we move to a slot which is in the same epoch, we can just essentially add we have a new set of validators that will vote. But when we cross epoch boundaries, it's possible that some of the validators that voted, that were in the committee for the slot of B11, will also be in the committee for the slot of B13. So in this case, before we had J that was moving from 80 to 160. In this case, J moved from 80 to 80 plus X, where X is some value. This represents the stake of the honest validators that are in the committee of the slot of B13, but they were not in the committee of the slot of B11. So what is going to happen? These honest validators, they will vote for B13 or B11, depending, but definitely for B11 as they see that is canonical. So we have X weight added to the honest LMD-GHOST weight supporting B11, which becomes at least 51 plus X. Now, if we are going to work out the new P indicator, becomes 51 plus X divided by 80 plus X. Because X is added to both numerator and denominator, we know this is larger than 51/8, which is what we had before. And we know that this is actually larger than our target of half divided by 1 minus beta. So what we see is that P, this indicator P, which is again the fraction of the honest LMD-GHOST weight over the weight of the honest committee, never decreases. So, which means that once we see that this value is larger than half divided by 1 minus beta, means that B11 is canonical for us. As we saw, like P indicator, this value will never be lower than this threshold. And we've seen before that if this threshold is met, then it means that B11 is canonical. So basically, this threshold is always maintained, and this threshold implies B11 is canonical. So you can conclude that B11 will be canonical forever. This is all good, but we said, like, we rely on these temporary assumptions that we know who is honest. Of course we don't. How do we get around this? It's actually turns out to be simple. Not being able to determine who is honest and who is not, we can still determine the LMD-GHOST weight for B11, which we represent with S. So it turns out that if you use the original idea of checking that the LMD-GHOST support Byzantine or honest, we don't know, for a block is larger than the weight of the committee multiplied by half plus beta, this actually implies the threshold that we want on this P indicator, the one that assumes we know who is honest. So this means that if we have this, if we, at some point, we can detect that this ratio of S on W is larger than half plus beta, and we, sorry to introduce another term, we call this ratio Q. This implies the threshold we want for P, which is, again, the ratio of honest LMD-GHOST weight over the honest weight of the committee. It implies that this is larger than our desired threshold of path divided by 1 minus beta, which then means that B11 is canonical forever. So having this condition on Q, which is measurable, as just looks at the LMD-GHOST weight supporting a block and the weight of the overall committee is larger than half plus beta, we do actually know that B11 will be canonical forever. Of course, under the condition that our two assumptions hold. Now, the last bit is that so far we assume that B10, we worked on B11, assuming that B10 will be canonical forever. This is a very easy problem to solve. We just start asking this, checking this threshold for Q on B11. If B11 passes this test, we move back to the parent B10, and so on, until we get to the latest finalized block. As we know, the latest finalized block will always be canonical, of course, unless more than 1/3 of the state is slashable. That will break basically everything, so we don't need to progress beyond the latest finalized block. So all of this, what we achieved so far is a fast confirmation rule, or a confirmation, we see it's fast, the confirmation rule for LMD-GHOST. Now we need to actually also consider the FFG Gasper part, and this will give us confirmation rule for Gasper. Now, just a heads up, I won't be able to go into the full details of everything here, because let's try to explain here the way the protocol is modified when FFG Gasper comes in. There are a lot of details to it. I want to give you a high-level idea of how we deal with the problem of modifying the protocol so that we are also okay when FFG Gasper is introduced. Just explain a bit how FFG Gasper and LMD-GHOST interacts. With FFG Gasper, we have the concepts of checkpoints. Checkpoints are a pair of a block and a number, where the number is an input. And FFG votes are links between the source checkpoint and the destination checkpoint. These FFG votes are those that determine which blocks are finalized. The key concept is the one of justified blocks. One can think of justified blocks in my picture, the green ones are those that are finalized, the yellow is the justified. We can think of justified block as candidates for finalization. So an important concept is that the concept of the latest justified checkpoint. And also it's important to consider that FFG votes are included in the blocks themselves. And another concept is that we have this concept of justified according to the chain. So if you take the chain of B9 in this case, when you say justified B9 or justified according to the chain of B9, we mean the latest or the justified checkpoint, depending on how we say, but generally the latest justified checkpoint according to the FFG votes included in the chain of benign, basically including any of the blocks that are either benign or ancestors of benign. So looking at how the fork choice function changes when we consider FFG Gasper, the way it changes is that we start the fork choice. Basically, the call at the beginning I said, let's assume we don't have FFG Gasper, so we start from the genesis block. With FFG Gasper, we start from the latest justified checkpoint. And then we do remove some branches, and this is where the details are, quite detailed, so I don't have enough time. Let's say problematic branches are removed. And then we just apply the LMD-GHOST for choice algorithm, the remaining one. In this case, that's pictorially the yellow arrows represent LMD-GHOST votes photo. So as before, we compute the LMD-GHOST weight and we choose the branch that has the highest weight. So essentially, at high level, what we need to do to adapt our confirmation rule to this full protocol for a block B is to require that this is confirmed according to the algorithm that we explored when only considering LMD-GHOST, and then requiring that this block B is not filtered out by this when considering Gasper FFG, basically that it is included in this orange circle that I have on the right-hand side, that this is one of these blocks. If this is true, then because we just apply LMD-GHOST for choice to this set of blocks in the orange circle, we know that B is confirmed according to a confirmation rule that works for LMD-GHOST, so we know that B is also safely confirmed when considering FFG Gasper. This B is not filtered out when considering Gasper FFG amounts to two conditions, essentially. One is requiring that the epoch of the checkpoint justified according to the chain of B or according to the FFG votes, including the chain of B. So the epoch of such justified checkpoint is the previous epoch. This is going to guarantee us that B is not going to be filtered out by Gasper FFG during the current epoch. Then we have another condition which is going to ensure us that this will not happen in any future epoch either. This condition is composed like in different parts. In the first part, we compute the FFG votes for the checkpoint of B. And this is because, again, FFG votes are votes not for blocks, but for checkpoints. So we look at the weight of the FFG votes supporting the checkpoint of B. And the second line, we remove beta of the committee between the first slot of the current epoch and the current slot, as this committee might be dishonest. And so they might get slashed. If they're slashed, their FFG weight is removed. So with this, with what I have in the orange box at the moment, we can compute the minimum stake that will the minimum weight that in terms of FFG the checkpoint of B will have by the end of the current slot. And to this we add the minimum on a stake between the next slot and the end of the epoch, as we know that everyone will keep voting for a descendant of B, which also implies the FFG vote in support of the checkpoint of B. So we can add this. And so these two boxes together, they give us the minimum weight in terms of FFG votes that supports the checkpoint of B by the end of the current epoch. And we require that this is larger than 2/3 of the total stake, meaning that we know that by the end of the current epoch, we'll have enough FFG votes to justify the checkpoint of B. And we do have this additional assumption for this to work. We assume that these FFG votes will be included in a block at some time in the next epoch. This is quite a loose assumption, as amounts to essentially like if we're going to drop the limit on number of the stations in a block, this would amount to saying it's enough to have an honest proposal in next epoch. Now there is a limitation on the amount of justifications. This could be modified potentially to say we extend this limit is this if by adding these FFG votes allows us to justify some blocks. So there is this additional assumption that we rely on, which I think is quite a big assumption. And so all of this does give us a confirmation rule for Gasper, meaning that we confirm a block. What we know is this block will always be canonical. Now there is another property that users might be interested in. This is monotonicity. Explain what I mean. As we saw before, this Q indicator that we rely on was the ratio between the LMD-GHOST weight supporting a block and the weight of the overall committee must be larger than R plus 8. We already saw before. This might be true today, now, but might not be true in the next law, even though B is canonical forever. So this repeat just because this is sometimes tricky to, like, we might have that, again, this threshold we say is true, so we say B is confirmed. Then this threshold is not true in the next law, but B is actually canonical forever. Now this is all good. The only thing is that user might be confused when they query again and they see this block is not confirmed anymore. They question, well, is B at risk of being reordered out? So before diving in, looking how we solve this problem, I just want to put into words this property, which is monotonicity. We want to have this property that once a block B is confirmed at a given time, it will remain confirmed at all future times, assuming under the condition that our assumptions hold. So that there is a naive solutions, and is that users query confirmation only once, and they remember that forever. There is a problem with this, is that, again, the assumptions on the network being good and both being delivered in time might break at some time, and we would like confirmation to actually not work under those conditions. So of course, if we just query for confirmation once and we just stick to it, we keep confirming the block forever, even though there is a network partition. Ideally, we don't want that. So the challenge, of course, is that the indicator Q is not monotonic. And kind of simple solution, we can like take the naive solution and restrict it and apply, for example, only to the current epoch. So what we can do, we can keep track of the longest confirmed chain since the beginning of the current epoch, and we confirm any of its ancestors. This makes our assumption stronger, as we require like this assumption that on network behaving correctly since the beginning of the current epoch. However, it's not as bad as requiring this to be true since the block was first confirmed. We want to actually also confirm blocks from the previous epoch. This is because if you are in the first lot of the current epoch, for some reason that block might not have received enough attestations, enough votes. We want to be able to confirm blocks from the previous epoch as well. So we can extend this to the previous epoch by keeping track of the longest confirmed chain since the beginning of the previous epoch. And this does require moving our assumptions on network being good since the beginning of the previous epoch, but we think this is reasonable, as we don't expect user to use the confirmation rule when seeing wrong evidence of the network behaving correctly. We don't expect them to, they see the network is a bit sketchy for given number of epochs, and now it seems to be good. They are unlikely to rely on this confirmation rule. Reasonably, they want to see the network to be good for a long time. So there is this trade-off. So the question is, now what happens the next epoch? So if you look at this scenario, B is confirmed. Because of this previous rule, we force it to be confirmed until the end of epoch E+1. What we need in epoch E+2 for B to continue to be confirmed is that we need a descendant like B prime to be confirmed by the beginning of epoch E+2. And this, we do need an extra assumption for this. And this extra assumption, I want to highlight, is only for monotonicity. If this assumption, which is admittedly quite complicated, and it's complicated because of how Gasper works, we don't have monotonicity, we still have safety. So these are the key property of safety still maintained. And this is quite technical. I'll go over it quickly. What we need for block B to be confirmed again in E+2, we need that There is a checkpoint C, descendant of B, in the next epoch, so in epoch E+1. We need C, the checkpoint of B, CB, not C, but the checkpoint of B, to be justified in a chain where C is a checkpoint. So maybe the bottom chain, C is a checkpoint in the chain, and the chain has enough FFG votes to see CB as justified. We also need that in the chain, C has received enough attestations by the end of epoch E+1, or enough votes, so that the block of checkpoint C is confirmed. What happens then when we transition to epoch E+2, we'll have that block C, the block of checkpoint C, the checkpoint in epoch E+1 is confirmed, and therefore B is confirmed as a constant. These assumptions on point 4 can be seen in this way, like according to the value of beta, or the fraction of maximum fraction of dishonest stake, we have a different belief on how many honest validators need to attest for C during epoch E+1. The vertical, the number is the ratio of honest validators. So 1 means all honest validators. It does not mean all validators, only all honest. And this goes to just below 0.7 to all, depending on, and increases with the value of beta. For this assumption to hold, we need to, beta can never be more than 1/6. But again, all this X assumption is for monotonicity. Also, on a final note, this X assumption could be removed if we had an easy way to look at FFG votes for checkpoints that are older than previous epoch. At the moment, we don't have an easy way to do that, to implement it. If we had this, we could remove this extra assumption. We could just go back and making sure that for any epoch between B's epoch and the current epoch, no conflicting justified checkpoint can ever be created. But we cannot do this easily. So because of this, we need this extra assumption, which again is only required for monotonicity. I will conclude with some notes on initial experimental results. These were conducted by Circle. They ran the confirmation rule for over 6 days. They actually already posted the blog post. I didn't update this, sorry. What they saw is that 56 blocks were detected as being reorged out, including some reorg of depth 2. But the confirmation rule never got tricked. Confirmation rule never confirmed the block that was reorged out. So this is good for the safety property. They did execute the confirmation rule by polling beacon nodes at the 10-second intervals. And so ideally, this confirmation rule should be encoded directly in the client code and executed every time at the beginning of a slot. Also, they estimated the FFG weight from LMD-GHOST weight, which is, let's say, under approximation. They said that the results were good, that none of the reorg blocks were confirmed, no matter how the adversary's thresholds were tuned. In terms of time, they got confirmations time between 50 seconds to 80 seconds, depending on the adversary thresholds. Our belief is that this is because of the polling. We believe that if the confirmation rule is implemented directly in the client teams and executed at the beginning of each slot, we should be able to confirm block within one slot. That's one of the things that would be cool to someone help implementing it or proof of concept in a client team and see if this is true. But even though 80 seconds, we're speaking this 1.5 minutes, less than 1.5 minutes compared to the 16 minutes with finalization. So it's still pretty fast. Yeah. So this concludes. We have a paper which goes in a lot of the technical details. We also already have a consensus spec PR. If you're interested, then yeah, of course, if you're interested, hit me on Twitter. More than to collaborate and in bringing improved concepts or implementation to life. Thank you.
This is beautiful. Thank you, Roberto. I have never seen in depth for this, all these confirmation rule. You talked about Gasper, you talked about FFG and all these things. These are really good to see when we are looking into it, how it is actually, it can be visualized. It's nice. Thank you for sharing all these things.
No worries. Thank you.
had a list. I think you have answered some of the questions already. So maybe we can quickly look into some of the benefits and use cases of that. So if you have any like low-hanging fruits for application developer that they may be able to use this proposal and be able to create some apps that could be useful, would you like to maybe talk about that?
Yeah, one like say obvious one is say settlement. Anything that requires low value transactions, like paying for a coffee or something that is let's say in the likely scenario that there is a reorg, a likely scenario there's the assumptions don't hold and the blocks is reorged out, someone doesn't is a low value transaction that use case, like it provides so much more security than just block depth, which is what I think people tend to rely on today. So that's one use case. Another use case is for centralized exchanges. So some of these centralized exchanges at the moment, they have an optimized algorithms. As soon as they see the transaction is included in a block, they credit the fund, allow you to trade, but that allow you to withdraw anything until the block is confirmed. Of course, what happens if when they credit you the fund, then that block is reorged out, and in the trade, they need to somehow revert back all of these trades that you made, which is quite complicated. Rather than relying on just inclusion or block depth, they use the confirmation rule. It's far less likely. They will have to revert transactions, or revert trades, which is not great user experience. And another application which I think is interesting is related to block building. So I believe that for block builders, knowing whether a block is confirmed, or they could also look at it in another way, which is what is the fraction of adversarial stake that above which a block that is confirmed might be reorged out. Like you can see it another way around. You say this block is confirmed as long as no more than 20% of the stake is honest, and you can determine this value for each block. So block builders could use this information to decide how much to build. Like if they are building upon, there is a head of the chain that is a very low value of beta. It means that it's easy to be reorged out. They might want to bid less because there is a risk for them to then build upon this block, and this block will be reorged out, and perhaps their MEV is stolen. So these are some of the use cases. I think this is helpful.
That is great. Definitely having low block time would be helping more apps and, of course, different infra providers in between. I'm curious, you mentioned something about assumptions, like there are certain assumptions for this proposal. So do you think those assumptions maybe act as kind of blocker while getting, consent from different client teams?
I don't, my view, and this is my view, is that it's been more like 10 teams have been very busy with Spectra. Like, in a way, they know the good thing and the bad thing about this confirmation rule is that it doesn't require any hard fork. There was a change required to the fork choice algorithm for this confirmation rule to work, and that has already gone into Denkun. So, like, in a way, it's good because the client team can implement it independently. Also, there is no pressure like in implementing it because it can be done at any time. So I think it's about the assumptions. It's probably about that's what I think about finding the time compared to other things where they need to meet a specific timeline to get back trained, as they all need to implement something that is required for hard fork.
That's right. I was just trying to understand if we have enough buy-in for this proposal to maybe moving forward, we can have a proposal. By the way, talking about proposal, what do you think could be the expected timeline? Are you planning to document any proposal for this to be someday deployed on the mainnet?
Yeah, so in terms of, again, I'm not the one implementing this, but I feel like it's not too complicated to implement. Like I was thinking at some point of implementing a proof of concept myself, and the main problem I had was in finding where to get the information in the client code. So I think once you know where to get the information, where to get the attestations, how in the data structure of each client team, then I think applying the rule, like we already have a spec PR, so it should be relatively straightforward. I would say no. In terms of implementation, expect 2-3 months in terms of having a proof of concept, and then we need to do some testing of this proof of concept. So in terms of getting it to mainnet, would be 6 months, something like that, 6-9 months, perhaps, if we, depending how much testing we want to do.
Right. And I think there is a good news for you. I just noticed in the chat, Terence mentioned that he would be trying to finish this implementation for Prism and will reach out to you for any questions. So definitely you got one client in.
Now it's also recorded on the podcast, so you can't get away from it. That's good. I can point exactly what you said.
Great. Yeah, I think that's one of the idea of having this kind of conversation, including all developers. So if they find it interesting, we can perhaps get the implementation sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that definitely do. I say probably just to add to one of my answers, I think also, perhaps one of the difficulties is that why implementing it is not that complex. The algorithm itself is quite complex because of Gasper. So perhaps actually there has been some of the delays are due to actually being able to be comfortable with the product, as the algorithm it is indeed quite complex when you look at the details. Yeah, such as being that confident that actually it is correct.
With everything going smoother, how long do you think we can see this on mainnet? Can we expect it with Fusaka, the next upgrade after the Petra?
I would think so. Like, I would hope that because what happened, like, after the Cancun upgrade, when that was deployed, we didn't have the spec PR out yet. So I think like when Petra is deployed, that will be a good time, probably for developers to pick it up, as that will be like a bit of perhaps time where they are considering what's next, and we have it ready now. So I hope that it will be picked up when Petra is deployed, so to have it by the next one. But again, it's something that can be deployed progressively. Not all clients need to have implemented. There can be something that is progressively implemented.
It definitely seemed to be like a high value proposal and would be definitely useful for many of the application as well as layer 2 solutions. So let's hope it makes its ways to upgrade after Petra. Very well. With that, we are done with big questions, but we have recently started this new section called Rapid Fire Question Round, where we try to get answer to questions within 1 minute. So the answers that you may have to provide is either a one word or one sentence. All right. Your favorite Ethereum use case?
Decentralized finance. Decentralized asset management.
One feature you believe makes Ethereum stand out for other blockchains?
Their philosophy and belief in decentralization.
Your favorite domain of research, execution layer or consensus layer?
Consensus layer.
If you had to prioritize, would it be scalability or decentralization?
Decentralization.
What is the most pressing issue in Ethereum governance?
Making it effective and decentralized at the same time.
One word to describe the EIP process.
Could be improved. Improvable. Yes,
Most exciting recent EIP in 2025.
We're excited about the 61110, which was last year, but yeah, I don't have one for 2025.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I'm sorry there are no prizes for that, but you did great.
It's so challenging.
You did great on that. So yeah, it was pretty interesting to learn all about this. Like this is in-depth concept, and like very few people are actually aware of how blockchain works behind the scenes. So thank you for sharing all this information.
Thank you for having me on.
Very well. I think the proposed fast confirmation rule marks a significant step towards making Ethereum faster and more user-friendly. It's a promising achievement for a better Ethereum future. Thank you, Roberto Saltini, for taking the time to share this insightful overview with our community. Personally, I found today's session highly informative, offering plenty of valuable insight for the community to discuss and for client developers to evaluate the trade-off and conduct thorough testing. The Ethereum community thrives on collaboration and research like this. Dear listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you want to explore this research further, check out the resources in the show notes. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Connect with us on social media and drop a comment to join the conversation. We'll be back with another interesting proposal for you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep building, and keep perfecting the Ethereum blockchain. This is Pooja Ranjan signing off.